In a silent Ivy League lecture hall, a 12-year-old black boy in a frayed hoodie grabs a piece of chalk and solves a math equation no PhD could touch. The numbers are flawless, the proof undeniable. But instead of applause, the professor recoils and calls security. No one asked his name. No one believed his mind. Within minutes, he's marched out like a criminal. What they didn't know, his answer would break the system. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. Tucked beneath a hoodie 3 sizes too big, with frayed sleeves and patches on the elbows, 12-year-old Amir Blake walked through the tall, echoing hallways of Harrington University, like a whisper no one heard. The morning sun painted the marble floors gold, reflecting off polished wood and brass plaques bearing names of dead benefactors, none of whom would have imagined a child like Amir walking here alone, unnoticed, and unwelcome. No one asked who he was. No one wondered why a child, and a black child at that, was roaming through the mathematics department of one of America's most elite Ivy League universities. Eyes flicked past him like he was part of the janitorial equipment. Some tightened their grip on their coffee. Others shifted their posture subtly, stepping aside like he might brush too close. A student glanced at him, frowned, then kept walking. Another muttered, "Wrong building, kid," without breaking stride. But Amir wasn't lost. He moved with a quiet, odd certainty. Clutched in his hand was a crumpled sheet of paper, the corner of a printout he'd seen online. It featured a photograph of a blackboard, one covered in a half-erased complex number theory equation that had stumped Harrington's own doctoral candidates for 2 years. A visiting lecturer had joked about it on a podcast, saying, "We're not even sure it's solvable without advanced computational modeling. And even then, good luck." Amir had solved it in the back of a public library in 17 minutes. He came here not to prove anything, not even to show off, but because he was too young to understand that some spaces weren't made for him. Not yet. He simply wanted to verify his solution. That was all. To see if the board in the photograph was still in the same room. And maybe, just maybe, to feel the air of a place he knew his mind belonged in, even if his skin said otherwise. As he crept into room 3B, a cold lecture hall with chalk dust still hanging in the air from an early class, Amir scanned the walls. Then he saw it, the board, still intact, still stained with the remnants of the unsolved equation. There were layers of ghostly markings beneath it, where other attempts had been wiped away, like failed prophecies. He stepped forward, unzipped his hoodie, took the chalk in his hand with the reverence of someone picking up a sacred relic. It was quiet, too quiet. He didn't notice the footsteps in the hallway. He didn't hear the soft conversation just outside the door. But inside he worked quickly. His small hand flew across the board, writing numbers, symbols, and transformations, with the ease of someone solving a crossword, not a doctoral-level mathematical conundrum. For a brief moment, there was only chalk and thought, flow and focus, a boy communing with the language of the universe, alone. Then the door opened. Professor Elliot Granger, a tall, distinguished man with silvery temples and a reputation as Harrington's sharpest intellect, stepped inside mid-sentence. He was lecturing to a group of visiting alumni, walking backward as he gestured toward the next room. And this is one of our more historical lecture spaces, built in the 1930s. It's housed some of the most brilliant minds in... He stopped, cold. His eyes landed on Amir. On the board, on the clean, precise logic, filling in gaps the university's own team hadn't been able to bridge for years. The symbols danced. The proof was unfolding in real time. The group behind him murmured in confusion. Elliot blinked once, twice. The boy didn't notice them. He was still working, still lost in the quiet storm of his thoughts. But Elliot saw it. Not just the equation, not just the solution, but the audacity of it. The optics, the contradiction. A black child, alone, unsupervised, scribbling genius-level math in a restricted room? At Harrington, his throat went dry. He took a step back, almost bumping into an alum. "Who is he?" one woman asked quietly. I don't know," Elliot whispered. Amir finally looked up. There was no pride in his face. Just a shy, uncertain flicker in his eyes, as if asking, "Did I do it right?" Elliot didn't answer. He stared stunned. The boy's presence sent an unspoken ripple through the group. What is he doing here? Behind Amir, the equation glowed in silent vindication. Every line was correct. The solution was real. But none of them said that. Instead, Elliot Granger did something Amir didn't understand. Not yet. He turned slowly, pulled out his phone, and walked away. Behind closed doors, Elliot wasn't calling the math department. He was calling campus security. The air in the lecture corridor hung heavy with something that didn't belong to the quiet sanctity of academia. Suspicion. Professor Elliot Granger stood frozen outside, room 3B, his phone trembling slightly in his palm. Behind the glass panel, the boy kept writing, chalk gliding effortlessly, connecting variables, restructuring logic with a calm precision that defied his age. Amir Blake didn't even glance up. He was lost in thought, lost in numbers, lost in a world that made sense only to him. The alumni group behind Elliot whispered uneasily. One of them, a retired banker with a sharp suit and sharper tongue, leaned closer. "You allow children to wander into these halls now?" he said, his voice laced with mock humor. The others chuckled nervously, looking at the boy as if he were a ghost in the wrong century. Elliot tried to smile, but it faltered. He didn't know what to say. The sight before him was extraordinary. Yes, but also dangerous. Not because the boy had done anything wrong, but because of what it represented. A disruption, an image that didn't fit the carefully maintained portrait of Harrington University. A 12-year-old black boy solving equations that their brightest doctoral students couldn't. He stepped into the room slowly, his footsteps echoing like distant thunder. Amir turned, startled, clutching the chalk as if he'd been caught stealing. The look on his face wasn't guilt. It was fear born from experience. The kind of fear that came from being told too many times that he was somewhere he didn't belong. Elliot's voice came out softer than he expected. "What are you doing here?" Amir hesitated, his lips parting as if he had to translate his thoughts into courage before speaking. "I just wanted to see if the equation was still on the board. I saw it online. I solved it." "Solved it?" Elliot repeated, blinking. He stepped closer, scanning the symbols. The solution wasn't random. It was elegant, structured, exact, terrifyingly correct. The boy nodded. "I just wanted to check if I got it right." The silence stretched. Behind Elliot, the alumni had drifted into the doorway, watching with curiosity that bordered on contempt. One of them whispered, not quite softly enough, "He doesn't belong here." The words cut through the air like a blade. Amir heard it. He dropped his gaze immediately, his shoulders tightening. Elliot's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. He wanted to. God, he wanted to. Tell them to stop. To remind them that genius knows no color, no age, but he didn't. He was a man too aware of how power worked in this building. Instead, he asked, "Where are your parents?" "My mom's outside," Amir said quietly. "She's parking. She said I could look around while she gets my form signed." "What form?" "The scholarship form. For the math camp." Elliot frowned. The Harrington Summer Program for Gifted Youth. It was prestigious and notoriously selective. He knew for a fact that applications had closed months ago. "Who told you to come here?" Amir's voice trembled slightly. "No one. I just thought maybe if they saw I could really do it, they'd let me in." The boy's innocence stung like a confession. His eyes were wide, hopeful, and completely unaware of the quiet judgment burning behind the glass. Elliot exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "You shouldn't be in here, son. This area is restricted." "I'm sorry," Amir whispered. "I didn't mean to break any rule." "I know," Elliot said automatically, though his tone lacked conviction. The unease in his chest deepened. Behind him, the banker muttered again, louder this time. "You better check if he touched anything important. You never know." Amir flinched. The words landed on him like ash. His small hands tightened around the chalk, then set it down gently, too gently, as if afraid it might explode. Elliot turned sharply toward the group. "That's enough." The banker raised an eyebrow. "I'm just saying, this is a secure facility." "This is a classroom," Elliot snapped. But even as he said it, doubt crept in, because he knew what would happen next. A report, questions, possible headlines. The optics were a nightmare. He imagined the dean's voice, calm but sharp. "Why didn't you report an unauthorized person?" He looked back at the board. The proof gleamed with unsettling perfection. If anyone else saw this, they'd ask how it was possible, and then they'd start asking who had done it. The implication would be clear, either a miracle or a scandal. And Harrington didn't do miracles for boys like Amir Blake. Elliot took a slow breath. His voice softened again, almost apologetic. "Wait here a moment. All right?" Amir nodded, though the uncertainty in his eyes said he didn't understand why. Elliot stepped out into the hall, closing the door gently behind him. The hum of the building seemed louder now. The faint buzz of fluorescent lights, the muffled chatter from other classrooms, the rhythm of his own heartbeat. He walked briskly toward the end of the corridor, where the phone on the wall hung beneath a red placard. Campus security. Emergency. He hesitated. He could feel the weight of his conscience pressing down, the question echoing, "What are you doing?" But his hand still reached for the receiver. He told himself it was protocol, nothing more. That it wasn't about race, or class, or fear. Just procedure. As the line rang, a small voice behind him made him stop. "Excuse me, sir." Elliot turned. Amir had followed him into the hallway, clutching the scholarship form in both hands. "I didn't mean to make trouble," the boy said quietly. "I can leave if you want." Elliot froze. The receiver dangled from his hand. Somewhere deep inside, something twisted. Guilt, shame, recognition. But before he could speak, a woman's voice answered on the line. "Campus security, what's your emergency?" Elliot's throat tightened. He should hang up. He knew he should. Instead, he said it. The words that would set everything else in motion. "There's a young boy in the mathematics wing. He's not supposed to be here." He glanced back down the hall. Amir was still standing there, waiting, trusting. On the other end of the line, the officer's tone changed, cautious, alert. "Description?" she asked. Elliot hesitated, then whispered the words that would haunt him later. "Black male, about 12. The silence in the hallway didn't last long. Within minutes of Professor Granger's call, the unmistakable static hum of campus radios grew louder. Two uniformed officers appeared at the far end, walking briskly, one adjusting the strap on her vest while the other unhooked a clipboard from his belt. Their faces were firm, not aggressive, not friendly, just ready. Ready for what they hadn't decided yet. But they'd been told an unauthorized black male minor was inside the mathematics wing, unattended. To the casual observer, it sounded like an intrusion. To them it sounded like a problem. Amir Blake stood near the hallway door, still holding the form he'd brought, though now it was wrinkled, slightly torn at the edges from the way his fingers had tightened around it. His eyes moved from the officers to Elliot, then back again. Something in the air shifted inside him, a small, shrinking thing. He wasn't smiling anymore. "Is this the boy?" the female officer asked Elliot, keeping her voice even. He nodded. He wandered into one of the graduate halls, unattended. "He cause any damage?" "No," Elliot said, then paused. But he was on the board, writing. The officer raised an eyebrow. "The board?" "He tried to solve the problem," Elliot said carefully, choosing his words like stones across a river. "One of our theoretical proofs." The officers exchanged a glance. That wasn't what they expected. But protocol was protocol. "We'll take it from here," the male officer said, motioning toward Amir. "Hey buddy, what's your name?" "Amir," the boy said quietly. "You here with someone?"
My mom. She's parking. She said I could come look."
His voice cracked slightly. "I didn't do anything bad." "No one's saying you did," the officer replied, though his tone didn't exactly comfort. "But we just need to check a few things. Can you come with us for a bit?" "I didn't break anything," Amir added quickly, eyes darting to Elliot. "I just wanted to try the math. That's all." Elliot said nothing, his jaw locked tight, as if silence might absolve him. The officers flanked Amir gently, but deliberately, one on either side, their badges glinting under the hallway lights. A few students nearby had begun to gather, peeking out from classrooms, some whispering, some filming quietly with their phones. And then it happened, a burst of condescending laughter from somewhere down the corridor. "They caught him?" someone said, not bothering to whisper. "Probably thought he could hack the grades." Another voice joined in. "Should have known it was fake. A 12-year-old in Harrington math. Come on." A group of students, mostly white, stood in a loose cluster, nodding, exchanging knowing looks, the kind that said we knew this didn't add up. Emir heard every word. His ears burned. He didn't cry, not yet, but his mouth pressed into a thin, firm line, like he was swallowing something bitter. As they walked him toward the exit, the whispers grew. One girl shook her head, muttering, "They're really letting anyone in these days." A professor watched from a doorway, arms crossed, eyes hard. No one stepped in. No one asked the boy's side. The hallway, once a space for ideas, had turned into a corridor of judgment. The walk of shame wasn't physical, but it was emotional, and it scraped Amir's dignity with every step. And then as they reached the marble lobby near the front entrance, The heavy double doors burst open. Amir! A tall black woman in her 40s, breathing heavily, eyes wide with alarm, strode in, car keys still in hand. She moved with the desperation of a mother too familiar with what a scene like this meant. Her name was Darlene Thomas, Amir's foster mother. "What's going on?" she demanded, stepping in front of the officers. "Why are you escorting him?" "He's with me." The male officer stiffened. "Ma'am, do you have identification?" Darlene pulled it from her purse without hesitation, holding up both her license and Amir's legal guardianship documents. "He's my son. He's enrolled in the Harrington summer program. Waitlist. We came to submit paperwork. Why is he being treated like a suspect?" "He was found in a restricted area," the officer explained. "Alone." "He's 12, Darlene snapped. "And he's a math prodigy. He came to this building because he's obsessed with math." "You think he wandered into your precious wing to what? Tag the chalkboard?" The crowd near the entrance grew. Students, parents, faculty, all drawn by the commotion. And then, Elliot stepped forward. Slowly. "I saw him working on the blackboard," he said aloud, as if confessing. He wasn't vandalizing it. He was solving one of our open proofs. That drew more attention. A young black student from the engineering department leaned forward. "Wait, what? He solved it?" "He was halfway through when I saw him," Elliot admitted. And it was correct, at least from what I could tell. Now the phones were raised higher. The tension shifted, not vanished but transformed. Whispers turned to murmurs of curiosity. One of the security guards glanced at the other. "We're going to need the dean." And then came the twist no one expected. From behind the front desk, an admin assistant nervously stepped forward, holding up a printed email. This just came through from the director of youth admissions. It's about Amir Blake." Everyone turned. She read aloud, hesitantly. "Due to a unanimous recommendation from the regional math board, Amir Blake is being fast-tracked for immediate review and consideration for full scholarship and placement into Harrington's Youth Gifted Initiative." A stunned silence fell. The same boy they just escorted out of the building like a criminal had just been invited in by the university's highest education council. Darlene folded her arms, leveling a hard stare at Elliot. "Still think he didn't belong here?" Elliot opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked at Amir. The boy's face was a mask now. Not of triumph, not even of relief, just hollow quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when even victory feels tainted. The admin stepped forward again. "They want to meet him today. The vice chair of mathematics is on his way." The crowd slowly began to disperse, tension leaking out, replaced by a strange awkwardness. Some looked embarrassed, others indifferent. But the humiliation lingered, etched into Amir's posture, into the way he kept his eyes on the floor. As the vice chair's office prepares for Amir's arrival, an anonymous student posts a blurry photo of Amir being escorted by security, with a caption that reads, "Caught trespassing. They'll let anyone in now." The image begins to go viral. The meeting that followed was supposed to be a clarification, a routine discussion between Darlene Thomas, Amir's foster mother, and the Harrington University administration. But it turned into something else entirely. They sat in a small conference room with frosted glass walls that blurred the figures of passers-by outside. The dean of student affairs, a man named Richard Holloway, sat at the head of the table, his posture stiff, his tie perfectly aligned. Across from him, Darlene sat with her hands folded over Amir's paperwork. Amir sat beside her, quiet but alert, his small fingers tracing invisible equations on the tabletop, the only sign that his mind was still moving even as the world tried to stop him. Richard cleared his throat. "Miss Thomas, we appreciate your visit today. However, we need to discuss the events that took place this morning." Darlene nodded slowly. "Yes, I'd like to discuss them too. Like why a 12-year-old was treated like a threat for walking into a classroom." Richard didn't flinch, but his tone grew firm. "It's university policy, ma'am. Unauthorized individuals, particularly minors, are not allowed access to academic wings without prior consent." "He wasn't breaking in," Darlene said. "He was solving an equation. You've seen the footage, haven't you? You saw what he wrote." The dean sighed. "That's not in dispute." "Then what is?" she pressed. He exchanged a glance with another administrator, a woman with a clipboard who hadn't said a word yet. Then he leaned forward. "The issue, Miss Thomas, is not his intellect. It's that his presence caused a disruption." Darlene blinked, disbelieving. "A disruption?" Richard continued, reading from a printed statement. Due to the incident in the mathematics wing and the reaction it provoked among students and faculty, we've determined it's best for Amir Blake to refrain from entering Harrington property until further notice. He will, of course, still be eligible for off-campus review by the scholarship board. Darlene stared at him, stunned. You're banning him? A child? For solving a problem your graduate students couldn't? The woman with the clipboard spoke up for the first time. This decision isn't punitive. It's protective. For everyone involved. Protective? Of who? Darlene shot back. Your reputation? The woman hesitated. There were reactions. Some students felt unsafe with a stranger entering an academic space unaccompanied. There's already chatter on social media. We're trying to prevent escalation. Darlene let out a sharp laugh. The kind that carried both disbelief and fury. Unsafe? He's 12. The only thing he's armed with is a piece of chalk. Richard exhaled. Miss Thomas, I understand your frustration, but this is a private institution. We have to maintain order. Amir finally spoke, his voice small. I didn't mean to make trouble. Both adults fell silent. He looked up at them, his brown eyes wide but dimmed by confusion. I just wanted to see if I could do it right. The dean's expression softened for a flicker of a moment, but not enough to change anything. You're an exceptional boy, Amir. Truly. But rules exist for a reason. Darlene rose from her seat. You want rules? Fine. But don't pretend this isn't what it looks like. You saw his color before you saw his talent. You saw a problem before you saw potential.
Miss Thomas.
No, say it, she demanded. If it were a white boy in a sweater vest scribbling on that board, you'd have called him gifted. But my son? He's a disruption. Richard stood now, defensive. I assure you, race has nothing to do with this. Darlene leaned forward, her voice low but cutting. Then why does it always end the same way? The room fell into uneasy silence. Amir looked between them, unsure which adult to trust. When they left the building, the receptionist avoided eye contact. Security held the door open but didn't smile. Students in the lobby pretended not to stare. Amir walked out clutching his mother's hand, the word banned echoing in his mind, even though no one had said it aloud to him yet. Outside, the afternoon light felt too bright, almost harsh. Darlene stopped at the steps, kneeling so she was eye level with him. You didn't do anything wrong, baby, she said softly. You hear me? He nodded, but his voice was hollow. They don't want me there. They don't deserve you there, she corrected. There's a difference. He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. They got into her aging Toyota, the same one that had brought him to the university full of hope that morning. As they drove off, Amir watched the towers of Harrington University shrink in the distance, until they disappeared behind a line of trees. Meanwhile, back on campus, the conversation was already changing. Students shared whispers, screenshots, and speculation. The footage of Amir being escorted by campus security, the same blurry image that had gone viral earlier, was now spreading across platforms faster than anyone expected. But this time it wasn't just a picture. Someone had uploaded video. It started with the shot of Amir standing before the chalkboard, chalk in hand, his hoodie sleeves bunched around his wrists. The camera zoomed in, shaky, grainy, capturing the moment he drew the final line through an impossibly complex formula. Then came the sound of clapping, not applause but mockery. The person filming whispered, "What's he doing? This kid's nuts." The video cut to the arrival of security, the quiet voice saying, "They got him." And finally, it ended with a slow pan of the equation itself, the one the professor had admitted was correct. The caption read, "Kid breaks into university. Solves the impossible. Gets escorted out anyway." Within hours, it spread like wildfire. Comment sections flooded with outrage, disbelief, and the inevitable mix of racism and defense. Typical. They fear what they can't control. 12 years old, and smarter than the people paid to teach him. There has to be more to the story. Universities don't just remove kids for math. He didn't belong there. End of story. By the next morning, news outlets were calling. The university's PR office scrambled to contain the narrative. They released an official statement that only made it worse. Harrington University upholds strict security protocols. While we admire young Mr. Blake's enthusiasm for mathematics, his unsupervised entry into restricted academic facilities posed a safety concern. We wish him success in his future endeavors. Safety concern. Those words became the new wound. Darlene read the statement aloud in their kitchen, her voice shaking. A safety concern, Amir. That's what they called you. Amir sat at the table, doodling equations in silence. Then he whispered, almost to himself. They think I'm dangerous because I'm smart. Darlene reached for his hand, squeezing it tight. No, baby. They think you're dangerous because you remind them of what they can't be. She didn't know it yet, but the story was no longer theirs to contain. By nightfall, the video had crossed platforms, reaching national feeds, then global ones. Influencers debated it. Academics dissected it. News anchors said his name with practiced gravitas. Emir Blake, the boy genius, banned from Brilliance. And while Darlene tried to protect her son from the noise, one thing was already spiraling beyond her control. The world wasn't done watching. In the dim light of their living room, Amir scrolled through his mother's phone when a new notification appeared. A private message from an unknown account with the Harrington University logo as its profile picture. The message read, "You shouldn't have posted that video. You don't know what you've started." The next 48 hours changed everything. By Monday morning, the story of 12-year-old Amir Blake, the black boy genius kicked out of Harrington University, had spread far beyond what Darlene could have imagined. It wasn't just a viral clip anymore. It was a conversation, an argument, a cultural flashpoint. News channels played the same 20-second snippet in rotation. Amir at the chalkboard. The slow zoom on the equation. The moment the security guards arrived. Anchors debated whether it was racism, overreaction, or misunderstanding. Panelists spoke over one another, each chasing the last word. A security risk? He's a child. We don't know the full context. Universities have strict rules. But it's always our kids who get labeled unsafe when they're brilliant. On Twitter, hashtags erupted. Let Amir learn. Banned for being black. Chalkboard child. Amir's face, shy, brown-eyed, uncertain, became a meme, a symbol. Someone photoshopped him onto the cover of Time magazine, with the words, "The boy who solved what academia couldn't." Others made mock headlines, "Genius interrupted." At first, Darlene didn't know how to feel. Pride mixed with fear, and the combination left her nauseous. When she opened her phone, thousands of messages flooded her inbox. Some offered support, others pity, and too many dripped with venom. "Keep that kid away from our schools." A setup, no way he did that himself. Affirmative action gone too far. She turned off notifications, but the noise didn't stop. By afternoon, reporters had found their address. Vans lined the curb. Cameras waited. Darlene drew the curtains and refused to answer the door. Inside, Amir sat at the kitchen table again, sketching new equations on scrap paper. It was the only way he knew to stay calm. The quiet hum of his pencil became a heartbeat. "Mom," he said softly. "Why are they mad at me?" She closed her eyes. "They're not mad at you, baby. They're mad at what you represent." "What do I represent?" Darlene hesitated. "Change. And people hate change, especially when it looks like us." He thought about that for a long time. The paper in front of him filled with shapes and symbols he didn't even name aloud. That evening, a knock finally came that she couldn't ignore. When Darlene opened the door, a man in his late 30s stood there. Sharp suit, laminated badge hanging from his neck. "Miss Thomas? My name's Calvin Peters. I'm with the National Tribune. I'd like to interview your son." She frowned. "We're not interested in more coverage." Calvin held up a hand. "Please just hear me out. I'm not like the others. I'm a math correspondent. And I'm black." That last part gave her pause. Calvin lowered his voice. "I watched that video 10 times. I checked his work frame by frame. Your boy didn't just stumble into that solution. He understands it. What he wrote on that board wasn't imitation. It was discovery." Amir, who had wandered into the hallway, peeked from behind her. Calvin smiled. "Hey there, genius." Amir didn't smile back. "You're not gonna make fun of me." Calvin's expression softened. "Not in a million years." That night, the article dropped. The equation of injustice. How a 12-year-old black prodigy solved what academia couldn't, and was shown the door. It was part exposé, part celebration. Calvin broke down Amir's math step by step, proving its accuracy, while also indicting the university's reaction. The headline caught fire. Within hours, international outlets picked it up. CNN, BBC, NPR, The Washington Post. Darlene's phone buzzed nonstop. Offers began pouring in. Interviews, sponsorships, invitations. Everyone wanted a piece of the miracle. But with every headline that praised him, another questioned his authenticity. A Fox anchor sneered through a smile. A 12-year-old solving unsolved graduate-level problems? It's either divine intervention or, let's just say, selective editing. A panelist added. We've seen this before. Society desperate to elevate black excellence to look progressive. Maybe this is just another example of tokenism. The word token began to stick. By day 3, Amir's image had been used by both sides of the cultural war. Progressives called him proof of underrepresented brilliance, while skeptics called him a viral experiment. He saw both. Late one night, he scrolled through comments under a video of himself. His mother had fallen asleep on the couch. Exhausted, he whispered each insult under his breath. Slow, deliberate, like reciting a math formula in reverse. He's probably lying. His mom's milking this. It's a setup. A publicity stunt. He shut the phone and stared at the dark TV screen. His reflection faint. Maybe I should have just stayed quiet, he murmured. From behind, Darlene stirred awake. You did nothing wrong. He turned. But they think I cheated. They think that because you don't fit what genius looks like to them. I don't even look like I belong there, he said quietly. Darlene walked over, kneeling beside him. Then you'll build your own there. But she didn't know how heavy that promise would become. The next morning, an email landed in her inbox with a gold and black logo. The National Math Masters Invitational. The most prestigious youth mathematics competition in the country. The message was short. Dear Ms. Thomas, we've followed Amir's story with great interest. The committee would like to extend a special invitation for him to participate in this year's National Math Masters in Washington, D.C. We believe his inclusion would inspire countless students worldwide. All expenses covered. Sincerely, Dr. Leon Gardner, Chair, National Math Masters Committee. Darlene stared at the screen, unsure whether to smile or cry. This was the opportunity of a lifetime, the kind of validation that could silence every doubter. When Amir read it, his eyes lit up for the first time in days. They want me to compete? Really? She nodded. Really. But something in the wording gnawed at her. Special invitation. Inspire students. She noticed the subtle phrasing that said more than it meant to. They didn't just want Amir for his brilliance. They wanted him for his story. A trophy in a skin tone they could applaud from a safe distance. She printed the letter anyway and placed it on the fridge. We'll go, she told him, forcing a smile. You'll show them what they tried to deny. He nodded eagerly. But miles away, in a private meeting room, Dr. Leon Gardner slid the same invitation letter across a table toward a group of sponsors. Let's be honest, one of them said, smirking. This'll look fantastic for our diversity campaign. Gardner nodded. Yes. Just make sure the cameras are rolling. In her inbox, Darlene received a follow-up email she almost missed, buried beneath dozens of others. It was unsigned, no name, just a single line. They don't want him to win, Miss Thomas. They want him to perform. The ballroom of the Westin Grand in Washington, D.C., had been transformed into a stage for mathematical warfare. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above rows of velvet chairs, and an enormous LED screen framed the stage with bold lettering. National Math Masters Invitational. Cameras panned the crowd. Lanyards dangled from the necks of prodigies from across the country. Indian, Korean, Jewish, white, and now, for the first time in its 32-year history, a black child sat in the top 10. Amir Blake. He wore a navy blazer. Darlene had found on clearance and a button-up too big for his thin frame. Still, he sat upright, eyes scanning the screen ahead like it was a battlefield. Beside him, Darlene tried not to show her nerves. The previous night's email haunted her. They don't want him to win, Miss Thomas. They want him to perform. She'd nearly pulled him out. But when she brought it up over breakfast, Amir just said, they invited me, right? Then I'll show up, but I'm not dancing for them. The event opened with polite speeches and forced diversity smiles. The chair of the committee, Dr. Leon Gardner, delivered a glowing introduction. This year we welcome new faces, including young Amir Blake, whose story has already inspired millions. Polite applause followed. Amir didn't flinch. He didn't need their claps. The first round began with energy. 30 competitors, quickfire algebra, 20 seconds per question, displayed on screens. Amir buzzed in second fastest and answered every question correctly. The crowd murmured. Judges raised eyebrows. One of them, a thin, gray-bearded man, scribbled a note, not looking pleased. Round 2, probability. Amir's hands never hesitated. His calculations were internal, near invisible. His mind moved like a machine. He began to pull ahead. After round 3, he was tied for first with a 14-year-old from Palo Alto named Sebastian Chu. During the short break, a judge approached Amir's station with a clipboard. "Mr. Blake," he said in a clipped tone, "we'll be increasing the difficulty level of your next section. Nothing personal. We believe in stretching potential." Darlene overheard from the audience. "Excuse me?" she called out. "Is that standard?" The judge smiled thinly. "We want to ensure we're not under-challenging any participant." No one else received the same notice. Back on stage, Amir read the next question. A combinatorics puzzle, so convoluted that even the older teens blinked. The timer began. He closed his eyes. Thought. Reopened them. Buzzed in. The judge paused. "Your answer?"
Tutor.
A beat of silence. "Correct." The room gasped. By the final round, Amir was leading. 2 points ahead. The last question would decide everything. The host stepped up with a grin. "This final problem," he announced, "will be different. Contestants may use pen and paper. 5 minutes on the clock. Partial credit will not be awarded." The screen flickered. The problem appeared, a monstrosity of number theory, advanced modular arithmetic layered with abstract functions. The kind of problem usually given to undergrads in elite courses, never to minors. Judges glanced at Amir. Darlene's heart pounded. He stared at the screen, then, slowly, began writing. 1 line. 2. 5. The timer ticked. 4. Other contestants hesitated. Scribbled. Erased. Started over. Amir wrote faster. His fingers moved in a rhythmic pattern, like a musician at work. At 0040 seconds he stopped. Then, confidently, he slid his answer sheet forward. Time expired. The judges collected the papers. Silence stretched. Murmurs rippled. Dr. Gardner stepped onto the stage, envelope in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have our final scores. In 3rd place, he named a boy from Texas. Then 2nd place, Sebastian Chu. And finally, in 1st place, a pause. A slight stumble. Actually, we have an update." Gardner continued. "Due to a procedural review, 1 contestant has been disqualified for violating the rule requiring complete derivation steps on final questions." Confused gasps echoed. Amir's brow furrowed. He'd followed the rules. Therefore, Gardner finished. "Our 1st place winner is Sebastian Chu." Applause. Flashbulbs. Music. Amir sat frozen. Derivation steps? That wasn't part of the instruction. The judge had said, "No partial credit." He'd answered cleanly. Darlene stood up. "That's not what the rules say." Gardner avoided her gaze. It was clarified backstage to the judges. "It's standard to expect full working when problems reach this level." No one told him that. She said loud enough for others to hear. Some parents turned. Others shifted uncomfortably. Sebastian accepted his trophy with practiced ease. Amir stared down at his empty hands. As they walked off stage, another contestant, a brown-skinned girl from Chicago, whispered to Amir, "They changed it for you. You know that, right?" He didn't reply. In the hotel hallway, Darlene knelt beside him. "You were robbed." "I know," Amir said, his voice flat. "You want to say something online?" she asked. "We'll post the question. Let people judge." He looked at her. They already did. Later that night, a backstage technician anonymously leaked the pre-recorded judge instructions. In the clip, the host clearly says, "No need for full derivation. Correct final answer only." The video would go live the next morning, but Amir didn't know that yet. In the elevator, on their way back to their hotel room, Amir's phone buzzed with a new message request. It read, "They didn't just rig it. They've been watching him for months." The morning after the competition, the digital world did not calm. If anything, it turned into a cyclone. In news feeds, on talk shows, across social media timelines, voices rose with a familiar cadence: disbelief, dismissal, and doubt. They didn't question whether Amir Blake could solve the problem. They questioned why. They asked, why would a kid like him do math like that? The subtext: because a black boy, 12 years old in the elite space of Harrington University, simply couldn't be that smart. A renowned mathematics blogger wrote, "This is obviously a media stunt. My bet someone coached him behind the scenes." Another headline read, "Suspicious accuracy. When kids get too smart, adults start to worry." The commentary had a pattern. Genius was acceptable only when it fit the expected image. When it didn't, when the prodigy wore a hoodie and looked different, the narrative shifted to suspicion. At breakfast, Darlene scrolled through her phone, mouth parched. Screenshots showed messages like, "He probably memorized it. Wonder if it's his tutor doing the work. They'll hype anything for diversity now." Amir sat across the table, untouched pancakes in front of him. Eyes narrowed at the screen beside his mother. "Mom," he said quietly, "why do they say I cheated when I didn't?" Darlene looked up, her throat tight. "They say a lot of things, but you know the truth." She reached across the table, placed her hand on his. He didn't take it, but didn't pull away either. A moment of solidarity in the quiet kitchen. Outside, the blog posts turned into op-eds. One former university professor argued on radio, "It's not impossible, but statistically improbable. He may have benefited from unfair supervision." The logic was subtle, less about his ability, more about his background. He became the example of the anxiety many institutions have about black brilliance. Absolutely present, but rarely acknowledged as legitimate. Meanwhile, mainstream outlets ran feel-good stories of young white prodigies, emphasizing dedication, hard work, parental support. For Amir, the narrative was the opposite, sensational, doubtful, and wrapped in racial undertones. At school, he logged in to see his inbox flooded with messages from classmates at his middle school. Some cheerleading. Others snide. "Wow, you really did it. Are you sure you did it yourself? Should I tell my tutor to help me like you?" The teen's sarcasm felt heavy. He felt the difference between being celebrated and being scrutinized. Then something unexpected happened. A major national investigative website posted an article entitled, "Tutor or Talent: The Hidden Hand Behind Amir Blake." It referenced unnamed sources, claimed to be insiders at the competition, and insinuated that Amir's presence was orchestrated. The twist: the article included a leaked email suggesting that one of the sponsors had offered guidance to his team weeks before the event. Darlene's phone buzzed with a forwarded copy. She felt like her world was tilted. She called Amir into the living room. "We need to talk about this article." Her voice was steady but strained. "Have you been working with someone?" Amir shook his head. "No one helped me. I did it." He stood firm, though his voice cracked. "They're saying I wasn't enough." Darlene closed the laptop gently. "Don't respond publicly yet. We'll figure this out together." But inside she was angry, hurt, and furious. This wasn't just one smear piece. It was a deep dive into suspicion, and it carried the same old message: being black and brilliant renders you suspect. Amir withdrew to his room, sitting at his desk, pulling out the same crumpled printout of the equation. He traced the lines he had written, the symbols he had drawn. "I still remember every step," he murmured. "They just don't believe me." The silence that followed was louder than any voice. Later that afternoon, Darlene received a phone call from the middle school, where Amir was enrolled. The principal's tone was polite but firm. "Miss Thomas, some parents are upset. Some students are saying your son gave away answers to them. We'd like to meet." She froze. The same system that applauded him when convenient now treated him as a threat when inconvenient. In the days that followed, Amir's schedule shifted. Calls from talk shows requesting interviews, sponsors offering diversity speaker opportunities, the National Math Competition Committee sending more documentation to sign. And then one afternoon, as he came home from his foster home's driveway, there was a car parked outside, an older model sedan, license plate unfamiliar. A man got out. He wore a faded hoodie and jeans. His hair was unkempt, and his eyes carried decades of hurt. He approached the door slowly. When Darlene opened it, the man said, "Darlene Thomas." Her eyes widened. "I'm Malcolm Blake, Amir's father." Darlene's heart tore. She'd believed he was gone dead, incarcerated, lost. Yet he stood there, alive, appearing almost out of place in the surge of media around her son. Amir came into the living room behind her, his expression unreadable. Malcolm looked at his boy, studied him, as though seeing twice. There was pride in his eyes. Yes, but also sorrow, regret, and something Darlene couldn't name. Malcolm's voice was low. "I heard about my son. I had to see for myself." Amir took a step forward, his mind racing with feelings he didn't know how to name. Relief, anger, fear, all mingled. Darlene remained between them, a protector and yet uncertain. The unexpected twist: Malcolm revealed that he had been researching the same area of mathematics for years, an obscure niche in number theory, and had to stop after life circumstances forced him out of academia. He looked at Amir and said quietly, You finished it. You found the solution I never could. The words hit the room like a dropped stone in still water. It meant someone had passed a torch, intentionally or not. Amir's eyes snapped to his father. He felt the weight of legacy now, not just the weight of suspicion. The story wasn't just about proving himself to the world. It was about something deeper rooted in history, rejected and resurrected. Malcolm stepped back, hands clasped. I didn't expect to meet you this way. Darlene exhaled, the years of waiting compressing into that moment. Amir swallowed hard. Why now? He asked. Why show up after all this time? Malcolm didn't answer at once. The answer, when it came, was softer than the question. Because they're going to come for you next, and I can't let them do it alone. Late that night, Amir's phone buzzed again. A message appeared. Your father has his own file. We've had eyes on him since he left the field. And the sender? An anonymous account tagged simply as iLegacy Watchers. For years, Malcolm Blake had existed only in fragments, whispers from old case files, a name buried in sealed court records, and an occasional mention by social workers when Amir asked questions that never found answers. But now, he sat in the dimly lit living room of the Thomas household, no longer a rumor or regret, but flesh and memory broken, quiet, and filled with a brilliance the world never wanted to acknowledge. The silence between father and son was not empty. It was thick with things unspoken: abandonment, injustice, resemblance. Darlene sat nearby, watching both of them carefully. She had seen enough in her life to know that sometimes the truth arrived too late, but when it did, it demanded attention. You said you studied the same kind of math? Amir asked, voice still tight from the confrontation earlier in the day. Malcolm nodded slowly. Number theory. Modular algebra. I used to dream in proofs. He chuckled, though it didn't reach his eyes. I was working on abstract problem sets before I turned 15. Just like you. Amir leaned forward. What happened? Malcolm hesitated. Then, Harrington happened. The room froze. I was in their accelerated program back in '98. Only black kid in my cohort. I was winning competitions, publishing before graduation, thought I'd made it. But the higher I climbed, the tighter the walls closed in. What do you mean? Darlene asked. Malcolm rubbed his palms together, like trying to warm a memory too cold to touch. I had a proof, my own work on a new application, of Carmichael numbers. Was gonna submit it for the East Coast Research Prize. But before I could, someone stole it, claimed it, published under his name, a tenured professor. Amir's brow furrowed. What did you do? I confronted him. They said I was aggressive. Said I threatened him. Malcolm's voice darkened. They called campus security. Next thing I knew, I was in cuffs. A resisting arrest charge. A few minor priors from when I was a teenager. They made it stick. Darlene closed her eyes. How long? 8 years, federal. The numbers hung in the air like a death sentence. And when I got out, Malcolm continued, it was over. No school would take me. No journal would publish me. They blacklisted my name. He looked at Amir now, eyes damp. I lost everything. Except the math. That never left. Amir was quiet for a long time. Then he said, barely above a whisper, did you know about me? Malcolm's answer came with a crack in his voice. Not until recently. I had no idea you were mine. I didn't know, but when I saw the footage online, when I saw your handwriting on that board, I knew it was mine, too. Amir swallowed, his hands shaking slightly. You think they're doing it to me too? I don't think, Malcolm said. I know. They sat in silence again. Later that night, Amir couldn't sleep. He sat in the small attic room Darlene had converted into a study for him, surrounded by math journals, old competition certificates, and textbooks borrowed from 3 different libraries. But none of them settled him. He kept replaying his father's words. The betrayal, the stolen proof, the prison time, the pattern. At 2:11 a.m., curiosity got the better of him. He went downstairs to the storage closet. He'd seen Malcolm carry in an old duffel bag earlier. It had been tossed in the corner of the laundry room, forgotten. Something inside told Amir it held more than clothes. He pulled it out, unzipped it carefully. Inside were worn clothes, an old ID, and something wrapped in plastic. A thick, leather-bound notebook, blackened at the edges, and covered in scrawled equations. He opened it. What he saw made his breath catch. The first few pages were old diagrams, loose proofs, partially finished number sets. Things beyond his own level, but not completely foreign. Then came more. Full proofs. Theoretical extensions. Entire sequences of logic and math that predated his own work. Some nearly identical. And at the center of the book, on a yellowed, creased page, was a handwritten version of the exact proof Amir had written on the Harrington board 3 weeks ago. Same structure. Same core idea. Different notation, but unmistakably, the same origin. His hands trembled. He flipped back through dates. The page had been written in 2002, 17 years before Amir was even born. Malcolm hadn't stolen his brilliance. Amir had inherited it. Suddenly, it all made sense. The suspicion. The disqualification. The whisper campaigns. They weren't just reacting to Amir. They were reacting to history. They recognized the map. He closed the book and took it upstairs, sliding it beneath his pillow like a secret. The next morning, Darlene found Amir at the kitchen table with the notebook open. She froze. "Where'd you get that?" "It's Dad's," Amir said. "He wrote this years ago." Darlene stepped forward, scanning the pages. Her eyes narrowed. "This proof. Amir, this is what you were accused of cheating on." "I know," Amir said. "He had it first." She exhaled sharply. "We need to get this in front of someone. Someone outside of Harrington. Someone neutral." Amir nodded. "But not yet." "Why not?" "Because if they've buried this once, they'll try again. I need to understand why." Later that afternoon, Malcolm returned from a walk. Amir met him at the door, holding the notebook. "You wrote it first," he said. Malcolm didn't answer, just nodded once. "They saw your math in my hands. That's why they panicked." Malcolm looked at him, something shifting behind his tired eyes. "Son, if you hold on to this, you better be ready. They'll come for it. And for you." Amir stood tall. "Then let them." That night, Amir received a package delivered without return address. Inside, a USB drive and a printed note. "This is the proof they erased. The file that cost your father everything." The morning sunlight cut through the blinds of Amir's small room, spilling over the open notebook that had kept him awake all night. He hadn't slept a minute. The equations, graphs, and notes sprawled across the pages like secret maps to buried truth. His father's handwriting was rough but deliberate, the scrawl of a man who thought in patterns, not prose, and in those pages, Amir could see it clearly now. These weren't random calculations. They were discoveries. Every page held a language he understood instinctively. Prime patterns, modular constants, theoretical proofs that no one in his generation had ever seen published. Yet these weren't dated recently. The oldest entries were from before Amir had even been born. The deeper he read, the clearer it became. His father, Malcolm Blake, hadn't just been a math student. He had been on the verge of changing mathematics itself. Downstairs, Darlene brewed coffee in silence. The air smelled of burnt toast and tension. When Malcolm walked into the kitchen, she didn't turn. "He found it," she said quietly. "I figured he would," Malcolm replied. "You wrote those theories, didn't you? The ones in that notebook?" Malcolm took a deep breath. "Yes. Every one of them. But they're not just mine anymore. Not after what they did." "What do you mean?" she asked, turning finally to face him. Malcolm looked older than his years, the kind of aging that came from humiliation, not time. "When they sent me to prison, my research was still on the university's server. My advisor promised to preserve it, but when I got out 8 years later, everything was gone. The files, the notes, the references, all of it. And no one helped you recover it." He laughed bitterly. "I tried. But do you know what a convicted felon looks like when he walks back into academia, asking about lost intellectual property? Like a liar." Darlene set her mug down with a clatter. "So they stole it from you." Malcolm didn't answer. He didn't need to. Upstairs, Amir flipped through another section, pages filled with annotations and corrections in red pen. He turned one over, and froze. At the top corner of the page was a faint watermark, almost faded by age. He held it to the light. The pattern became clear, a seal embossed into the paper itself. A crest. A Latin motto. Harrington University. His stomach dropped. He ran downstairs, holding the notebook open. "Mom! Dad! Look!" Malcolm's eyes widened when he saw the seal. That's the university's archive watermark. Every official research copy had it, but I never printed those pages on Harrington paper. They did. Darlene frowned. "Meaning what?" "Meaning they didn't just take my work," Malcolm said, voice shaking. "They claimed it." Amir looked from one to the other. "You're saying the university owns your math?" They think they do, Malcolm said quietly. They must have uploaded my drafts to their research repository while I was still inside. Then someone else took credit. Darlene pressed a hand to her mouth. My God. Amir sat at the table, his mind racing faster than his mouth could keep up. But this means there's proof. If we can match these pages to the published research, we can prove you're the original author. Malcolm nodded slowly. That's what they'll never allow. Once something's embedded in institutional ownership, it becomes property. They don't give back property to men like me. Darlene crossed her arms. Then maybe they'll give it to a 12-year-old boy who can expose them. Malcolm looked at her sharply. That's dangerous, Darlene. You don't understand how deep this goes.
Amir interjected. No, Dad, I do. The math they said I cheated on. It's yours. They've been protecting that lie for decades. You think I can just sit quiet while they keep pretending?
Malcolm looked away. His silence was an answer. The rest of the day passed in uneasy quiet. Darlene called an old friend, a civil rights attorney she hadn't spoken to in years, and asked for advice. The response was curt. If the university holds any formal copyright or publication record, they'll fight this, hard. But Amir wasn't listening. He was already on his laptop, searching the Harrington Online Research Archive. He filtered through publication years, searching key terms from the notebook. Carmichael, prime distribution, inverse proof symmetries. Nothing at first. Then he saw it, a paper dated 2005, Reconstructive Number Structures in Modular Systems by Dr. Eric Callahan, Ph.D., Harrington University. He opened the PDF, and there it was. His father's proof. Word for word. Formula for formula. Amir scrolled through every page in disbelief. No mention of Malcolm Blake anywhere. But on the final page, in the acknowledgments, there was a line. With thanks to the anonymous contributors who laid the groundwork for this study. Anonymous contributor. Amir slammed his laptop shut. They buried him, he said quietly. They took his name off history. Malcolm stared at the table, face hollow. I told you. They rewrite the story until people like us disappear. Darlene sat down next to him, her voice trembling with anger. Then we'll write it back. For the next several nights Amir worked with a focus that frightened even himself. He cross-referenced Malcolm's handwritten notes with the published paper, building a side-by-side comparison. Darlene scanned pages, cataloging timestamps and notation. Together they built a silent archive of their own. Evidence not just of theft but of erasure. But something strange began happening. Every time Amir accessed the university archive, his Wi-Fi slowed, the cursor lagged, and then the page would refresh with a warning banner, restricted access, authorized faculty only. The first few times he ignored it. Then one night, the message changed. You've been flagged for unauthorized access. Please cease and desist. Amir stared at the screen. His stomach turned. Someone knew he was looking. He called out, Mom? Darlene came running, wiping her hands. What is it? He pointed at the screen. They're watching me. Malcolm's footsteps followed down the hall. He saw the warning, jaw tightening. They still have surveillance protocols. I used to log research data through those servers. They can trace anyone who touches restricted documents. Amir whispered. So what do we do? Malcolm thought for a long moment. Then, quietly, we take it offline. He reached into his bag, pulling out an old external hard drive, one from before his arrest. He handed it to Amir. Plug this in. It still has the root software I built for encryption. If we can download those papers and cross-match the hashes, it'll prove they copied my files. They worked in silence, the blue light of the monitor washing over their faces. Numbers flew across the screen, progress bars filling slowly. Darlene hovered behind them, torn between fear and pride. Finally, a soft beep signaled completion. Got it, Amir whispered. On screen side by side, the metadata glowed. File created, 11/04/2002. Author M. Blake. Transfer origin, Harrington server node. Proof. Malcolm exhaled shakily. That's the smoking gun. Amir smiled faintly. We can show this to the world. But just as the words left his mouth, a sharp chime interrupted them. A new window popped up on the computer. No sender name. No email. Just a plain text message. Return what isn't yours. Amir's hand froze on the mouse. Darlene leaned in closer, heart racing. Beneath the message, an image appeared. A high-resolution scan of one of the notebook pages, with the Harrington University logo freshly stamped across it. dated that same morning. The morning after the threatening message, the mood in the house was no longer just tense. It was haunted. Darlene double-locked the doors. Malcolm checked the windows every hour. And Amir, who once spent his nights dreaming of equations, now scanned every new email, like it might explode. The scan that appeared alongside the anonymous warning wasn't just a scare tactic. It was a statement of intent. Harrington University had updated their archives overnight, stamping their logo onto a notebook page. Amir had only shown to two people, his mother and his father. They're trying to rewrite ownership in real time, Malcolm muttered, pacing the living room. They're preparing to bury it again, only this time they know we're watching. Darlene, now fully consumed with protecting her son and the truth, took the evidence folder, the scanned notebook, the metadata from the stolen files, and screenshots of the server access threats, and brought it to 3 different law firms over the next 3 days. The responses were nearly identical. We'd love to help, Miss Thomas, but the burden of proof is extremely high. This would mean taking on Harrington's entire legal team. That's ambitious. Without notarized timestamps or formal copyrights, you don't have standing. The fourth lawyer didn't even wait for her to sit down. Against a university like that, he scoffed. You'll lose everything before you win anything. Each time she came home more defeated, Amir would ask, did they say yes? And each time her answer was softer than the last. By the end of the week, the headlines had quieted. Public attention shifted to the next scandal, the next headline. Amir's viral fame was fading, and with it the little leverage they had. Even Malcolm, who once burned with rage, now sat quietly most evenings, flipping through old equations like prayer beads. They don't care, he said one night. They've already moved on. But Amir hadn't. No, the boy said, voice steady. They're just waiting for us to give up. That's how they win. They didn't need to erase your name. They just needed you to stop saying it. Malcolm met his son's eyes. So what do we do now? We keep speaking, Amir said, until someone listens. The next morning, Amir did something bold. He uploaded a 10-minute video to his YouTube channel. No edits, no music, just him, sitting at his desk holding up the notebook and the scanned proof side by side. My name is Amir Blake, he began, and this is my father's math. This notebook was written before I was born. The university says this is theirs now, but this is my family's story, and it's not for sale. He flipped through the pages on camera, showing original theories, equations, and the watermark that mysteriously appeared on a scan only after they'd started investigating. Tell me what's more likely, he said. That a 12-year-old cheated or that a university erased a man and thought his son wouldn't find out. Within hours, the video hit 100,000 views. By morning, it had doubled. Comments poured in. This is academic theft. Plain and simple. They buried the father and tried to recycle the son. Harrington has a lot to answer for. But the most surprising comment came from a verified account. A name that had once triggered everything. I pro for Granger. I remember that equation. I remember the moment. I remember freezing. Let's talk. Darlene gasped when she saw the notification. Is that who I think it is? Malcolm walked over slowly, reading the comment again. Elliot Granger. The professor who saw Amir on the board. The man who called security. Amir clicked into the profile. It was real. Verified. His timeline had gone quiet after the initial story blew up. But now one tweet sat at the top. Silence is complicity. I need to make this right. They messaged him. 2 hours later, he responded with a time and address. A cafe not far from Harrington's campus. Darlene hesitated. You sure this isn't a setup? I don't think so, Malcolm said quietly. I remember him. He was shaken, but not cruel, just scared. They met that afternoon. Elliot Granger looked older than he did in the hallway that day, not physically but spiritually. Like the weight of his silence had aged him. He didn't shake hands. He just sat across from Amir and Malcolm and said, I owe you both more than an apology. Amir slid the notebook across the table. You've seen this before. Granger nodded. Not the book, but the math. That equation, the one you solved, was circulated internally at Harrington. In the early 2000s, they called it the phantom proof. It was assigned to top PhD candidates, as a challenge. No one ever found the origin. Malcolm clenched his jaw. Because they removed it. Granger nodded again. They wiped the attribution. But I always wondered how it appeared. No author, no source. When I saw Amir replicated on the board that day, my heart stopped. It wasn't just familiarity. It was guilt. You knew, Amir said. You knew it wasn't his to solve. I suspected, Granger said. But I didn't want to admit it. Not back then. Not when it would have cost me tenure. Darlene leaned forward. So why now? Granger looked at Amir. Because I saw myself in him. I saw the same spark, and I realized, if I let this pass again, I'd be complicit in erasing both of you. What do you want to do? Malcolm asked, guarded. Granger took a deep breath. I have access to Harrington's internal database, faculty-only archives. There's more buried than just that paper. I think your work is in there under different names, different versions. I want to help uncover it, but we have to be careful. If they catch me leaking internal documents, they'll destroy both of us. Amir didn't flinch. Then let's start today. Granger reached into his coat and handed Amir a flash drive. Start here. These are metadata archives from 2001 to 2004. Search for any document tagged with M7. That was the classification used for uncredited research submissions. If your father's work is in there, it'll be tagged. As they left the cafe, Malcolm walked slower than usual. Do you think he's telling the truth? Amir looked up at him. He froze when he saw me do your math. But he came back. Malcolm nodded. Then maybe it's time I did too. That night, Amir decrypted the files. Inside one document was a list of usernames who had accessed Malcolm's proof before it was deleted. One name stood out, the current dean of mathematics at Harrington University. It took less than 48 hours for Amir to unravel what Harrington University had spent nearly 2 decades hiding. From the moment Professor Elliot Granger handed him the flash drive, Amir worked like a forensic scientist, combing through terabytes of buried files, metadata logs, and cryptically named PDFs. The deeper he dug, the clearer the pattern became. In the early 2000s, a series of groundbreaking mathematical proofs were submitted through an internal faculty server. Each file bore the anonymous marker M7, later reattributed to prominent faculty, under collaborative research headers. But one thing none of those attributed files had: a recorded login history before. Amir discovered that every one of them had originally been accessed by a user with the internal ID, MB104. A user deleted from the system in October. Mal104, Malcolm whispered when Amir showed him the screen. That was my account, Blake. Malcolm Blake. They'd found it. The digital fingerprints of a stolen legacy. But what Amir hadn't expected was what came next. A private message from Professor Granger. Meet me at the West Hall Archives. Tonight, 9 p.m., no one can know. The message included a badge ID that would bypass campus security. It wasn't just a gesture of trust, it was a gamble. Harrington did not tolerate dissent from within. Darlene was hesitant. What if it's a trap? Malcolm shook his head. If he wanted to protect himself, he'd stay silent. He's already crossed the line by helping us. That night, Amir and Malcolm entered through the university's side gate, avoiding the front where cameras might still remember them. West Hall was old and untouched by time. Its columns cracked, windows fogged from decades of humidity and secrets. Granger waited inside the archives room, surrounded by shelves of forgotten knowledge. I don't have long, he said. They monitor faculty keycards after hours. Amir held up the flash drive. I found the user logs. He wasn't lying. Granger exhaled. I know. I never thought he was. I just didn't want to be the one to say it. Malcolm stepped forward. Then say it now. Granger swallowed hard. I remember the day you were arrested. It happened so fast. Security pulled you out of the lab like you were a thief. But what I'll never forget was how quickly your name vanished. By the next semester, your proof was being taught in classrooms. Without attribution, we all knew it was yours. Then why didn't you say something? Malcolm asked, voice low. Because I was 2 years from tenure. I had a mortgage. A daughter starting school. I was scared. Amir stared at him. So you let them erase him? Granger's eyes welled up. Yes. And I hated myself for it. But back then, you didn't challenge the hierarchy. You didn't question the tenured gods. Especially not for a man the university painted as a criminal. He turned to Malcolm now. But I want to fix it. How? Malcolm asked. Granger took a folder from his coat and laid it on the table. Inside were printed emails, correspondence between department heads from 2002 and 2004. They spoke in veiled language, but the meaning was unmistakable. Remove MB's credentials from the system before the inquiry. Reassign paper draft to Callahan, under joint credit. Wipe submission history. If this leaks, the optics are a nightmare. Do not link source material. Granger pointed to the top of one email. These came from the current dean. He orchestrated the cover-up. And he's still in power. Malcolm's jaw tightened. Then we expose him. Granger didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled out another folder. This one marked confidential legal. What's that? Amir asked. Granger opened it, revealing a set of documents. Internal disciplinary files, security reports, and deposition transcripts. This is your father's original university file, Granger said. I stole it from the legal department 2 years ago. I wasn't sure why at the time. I just couldn't let it be destroyed. He slid it across the table to Malcolm. Your arrest? It was never about aggression or threats. That was a narrative crafted to remove you. The security report shows no evidence of violence, no statements from witnesses. Just a dean's complaint and a convenient allegation. Malcolm stared at the file in stunned silence. Granger leaned forward. I believe we can reopen your case. We can present new evidence. Call into question the legitimacy of your expulsion and arrest. But, he paused. Darlene, who had entered quietly behind him, stepped closer. But what? Granger lowered his voice. But it has to stay quiet. No press. No social media. No video uploads. If we make this public, the university will close ranks. They'll destroy everything. You want us to trade silence for justice? Darlene asked, incredulous. I want you to survive this, Granger said. And maybe reclaim what they took. But if this goes public now, they'll bury it again. Legally this time. Amir looked at his father. What do we do? Malcolm stared at the file in his hands. The same file that had once ended his future. And now it could possibly restore it. But at what cost? If we stay quiet, Malcolm said slowly, they win again. In the shadows. Granger shook his head. No. This time they lose quietly. There's power in patience. We bring this through the right channels, file for review, and when the time's right, we make it public. But only after the case is reopened. Darlene spoke. You're asking us to trust a system that already failed us. I'm asking you to weaponize it from within, Granger replied. Like they did. Amir looked at both men. One broken by silence, the other trying to redeem himself through it. He reached into his bag and pulled out a fresh copy of his viral video. Then this goes on ice. For now, Granger nodded. I'll set up a meeting with the university legal committee. As far as they know, I'm acting on internal review. As they left the archives, Granger said one final thing. I can't promise you justice, but I can promise I won't stay silent again. Malcolm nodded once. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. That night, as Malcolm flipped through his university file, he found a photo paper clipped to the back. It showed him in 2002, standing in front of the chalkboard, with his original proof, but in the background, barely visible, stood a young graduate assistant, none other than Elliot Granger. The photo sat in Malcolm's hands like a ghost. There he was, frozen in time, standing in front of the chalkboard he once believed would define his future. He looked younger, sharper, a flame still lit behind his eyes. But it wasn't the proof that stopped his breath. It was the figure in the corner, a graduate assistant clipboard in hand, barely in frame but unmistakable. Elliot Granger. The revelation hit hard, not because it was new, but because it confirmed what Malcolm had already begun to suspect. Granger had witnessed more than just Amir's moment of brilliance. He'd been there during the first theft. He'd watched the story start, and then stayed silent. For 2 decades. He didn't show the photo to Amir or Darlene that night. Not yet. Instead, he tucked it into the back of the folder. He'd have to confront that truth later. For now, there was something else unfolding. The whispers had grown again. In the weeks since Amir's video and Granger's cooperation, momentum shifted. Quietly, strategically, with Granger's help, they filed for a formal academic misconduct review with the university board, not as a public attack, but as an internal request for re-examination. It was a chess move, not a protest. But while they played that game behind closed doors, the outside world had other plans. A young black filmmaker named Cheyenne Palmer reached out via email with a subject line that read, "We've been erased too long. I want to tell your story right." She wasn't a viral chaser. She didn't want a puff piece. Cheyenne had done her homework, and her documentaries on educational inequality and systemic bias had already garnered praise on PBS and the indie film circuit. Her proposal was simple. I want to make a documentary, Not just about Amir, but about Malcolm. A man who was buried before he was ever seen. I want the world to understand how brilliance can be criminalized when it shows up in black skin. Darlene was cautious. Another camera in our face could backfire. But Malcolm said yes before she finished. Let them see. All of it. Filming began the next week. Cheyenne arrived with a 2-person crew. Just her, a cinematographer, and a sound guy. Nothing flashy. Just quiet observers with deep questions. The first day was awkward. Malcolm stumbled through old memories. Amir sat silent, arms crossed. Darlene hovered in doorways, nervous. But by the third day, the story began to unfold like a wound finally breathing. Cheyenne asked about the arrest. They said I was aggressive, Malcolm told her. But I was standing in my own lab, trying to protect my own work. What happened after that? They didn't just take my freedom. They took my name. My math showed up under someone else's. My file was sealed. I went to prison with nothing but equations in my head. And when I came out, even those had been stolen. The camera caught everything. The tremor in his voice, the shame, the anger, but also the resilience. Later, Amir sat for his own interview. When I solved the proof, I didn't know it was his. I just wanted to be seen. Now I realize I was carrying his silence and his brilliance. Darlene joined on the 4th day. I watched them treat my son like a threat, a child with a mind like fire, and they acted like he brought a weapon. Cheyenne asked her gently, "What do you want people to understand? That racism isn't always loud." Darlene replied, "Sometimes it wears a tie and uses policy as a shield. Sometimes it steals your name, then smiles in your face while it frames your child as exceptional, but never quite enough." The footage was raw, no voiceover, no dramatic music, just truth. Cheyenne didn't rush. She filmed Amir working through problems at his desk. She followed Malcolm to the courthouse where he first stood trial. She captured them in silence, in laughter, in memory. Her lens told a different kind of story, one that wasn't just about math but about legacy, loss, and reclamation. A month later, the documentary premiered online. Its title was simple and haunting. The proof was mine. Within 48 hours, it reached 1 million views. By the end of the week, it aired on 3 major streaming platforms. And with it came a flood, not just of support but of reckoning. Black intellect trended globally. The story was picked up by the New York Times, NPR, and even international outlets. Old alumni began calling out Harrington on social media. Anonymous letters were sent to the board demanding an apology. A group of mathematicians from MIT issued a formal open letter stating, "If Malcolm Blake's theories were indeed repurposed and buried, it constitutes the most significant academic theft in modern mathematics." The university board scrambled. They issued a brief, sterile statement. "We are aware of the ongoing documentary and review. Harrington University is committed to academic integrity and continues to investigate claims through appropriate internal channels." But the world wasn't waiting anymore. The silence was over. Then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, it happened. Protesters arrived. At first it was just a dozen students, some holding signs, others sitting silently on the front lawn of Harrington's mathematics building. Signs read, "Credit the Black Mind. Where is Malcolm Blake's name? Justice for the father. Room for the son." Then came more. By sunset, there were over 200 students, faculty, alumni, and strangers who'd seen the documentary and couldn't stay silent. Amir stood on the steps, watching it unfold. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. But inside, the university was in chaos. A private email chain leaked among faculty, with the dean warning, "We are facing a credibility crisis. Any attempt to acknowledge Blake without legal liability must be coordinated carefully." And in the middle of it all, Granger sat in his office, reading a new notice from the university board. "We will proceed with a conditional review of Malcolm Blake's academic record. Further inquiry pending discretion of institutional counsel." They were cracking, but they weren't confessing. Not yet. That night, as Amir stood outside watching the protesters chant, a man in a black coat approached from the crowd. He handed Amir a flash drive and whispered, "This isn't just about your father's work. Harrington buried more than one." Amir stood in the center of the old recreation center, on 45th and Fairmont. Cracked tile floors, faded linoleum, fluorescent lights that flickered like they too were tired of being overlooked. It didn't look like a classroom. It didn't smell like brilliance. But to Amir, it was everything the Ivy League had refused to become: accessible, honest. Months had passed since the protests, Since the documentary. Since the flash drive handed to him in the middle of the crowd by a man in a black coat. That second drive filled with archived files, unpublished papers, and a quiet list of other erased scholars, had proven one thing: Malcolm Blake wasn't the only one. There were others, black researchers whose names disappeared just before publishing, students whose ideas were absorbed into faculty papers, janitors with notebooks no one ever read. The university's response was textbook: deny, delay, deflect. And while Harrington performed damage control and tightened its gates, Amir chose to build his own. He called it Numbers, New Understanding of Mathematics Built on Reclaimed Systems, a free program for young black kids with no access to advanced education, math enrichment, or recognition. He started with 5 students, all under 14. A shy girl from his old middle school, who loved geometry. A boy with a stutter who solved logic puzzles faster than most adults could blink. 2 siblings from the housing project down the block, who'd never seen a graphing calculator before but understood fractions like second nature. And a 5th, the daughter of a woman who'd once worked in Harrington's cafeteria. A girl who reminded Amir of himself in every way. The curriculum was his, not just his, it was Malcolm's too. Exercises drawn from old notebooks. Number games based on discarded proofs, concepts that didn't assume the student was behind, but assumed they were brilliant, and just needed the right window. Malcolm taught half the classes. Darlene coordinated the space and logistics. Cheyenne brought cameras occasionally, documenting the birth of a revolution one chalkboard at a time. And Amir? He taught with fire. His young students didn't just learn formulas, they learned ownership. Every lesson started with a mantra: no one owns math. But we own our minds. News began to spread. A local reporter visited, then NPR called. Then came the op-ed in The Atlantic, titled "When Institutions Fail, the Kids Will Build Their Own." But not everyone applauded. Several private schools rescinded scholarship offers to Amir after the documentary gained traction, citing public scrutiny and incompatibility with institutional values. One official, caught off record, said, "He's a great mind, but we don't need an activist in our halls." Still, Amir smiled. Every rejection built him stronger. Every closed door confirmed what he already knew. This wasn't about getting in. It was about building what no one could keep him out of. Numbers doubled in size within 3 months, then tripled. They moved from the rec center to an abandoned charter school downtown. Volunteers came. Black engineers, data scientists, retired teachers. They brought supplies, donations, laptops, desks. One woman showed up with a box of chalk and said through tears, "I used to clean classrooms like this. I never thought my son would get to learn in one." But the true turning point came in an envelope. Amir found it wedged in the school's mailbox, thick, embossed, with the Harrington University crest on the flap. He froze. He tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter. "Dear Amir Blake, we recognize your extraordinary contribution to mathematics and education. The university board, having reviewed your recent work and community leadership, is honored to invite you to participate in our Centennial Symposium as a featured guest and speaker. In addition, we would like to discuss future opportunities, including honorary recognition and possible academic collaboration. Warm regard, Dean Leon Russell, Department of Mathematics, Harrington University." He read it twice, then a third time. No apology. No admission of wrongdoing. Just an invitation to stand on the same stage that once expelled him in silence. He showed the letter to Malcolm that night. His father stared at it for a long time, then handed it back. "They want the light," Malcolm said. "Not the fire." "What do you mean?" "They want to put you in a frame. A success story they can point to and say, 'See, we supported him.' They want to erase the part where they called you a threat." "So what do I do?" Amir asked. "You decide," Malcolm said. "But just remember, if you walk in there, walk in on your terms, not theirs." Amir took the letter upstairs. He didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling and thought of chalkboards and walkouts, of viral videos and redacted files, of sitting in silence at 12 years old, while grown men whispered, "He doesn't belong here." The next morning, he put on his old hoodie, walked into Number, taught like it was the only place on earth that mattered. And when class ended, he made a decision. He would go back, but he wouldn't go as a student, or a guest, or a grateful child with something to prove. He would go as a founder, a builder, a voice for the silenced. Number S wasn't just a school. It was a blueprint. As Amir prepared his remarks for the Harrington Symposium, an email landed in his inbox. Not from the university, but from a former faculty member who'd resigned quietly in 2006. The subject line read, "Before you speak, there's something you need to know about the dean." The Harrington Centennial Symposium was not designed for people like Amir Blake. It was an event draped in prestige and heavy with tradition. Floor-length robes, Latin mottos stitched into the walls, and a guest list hand-picked for comfort, not confrontation. Held in the Grand Assembly Hall, the room shimmered with crystal chandeliers, and the soft, smug murmur of legacy. It was a place built for validation, not redemption. And yet Amir stood behind the velvet curtain, at stage left, wearing the same hoodie he had on the day he first solved the equation. Not a suit, not a uniform. His armor was memory. Beside him, Malcolm straightened his collar, looking proud but restrained. Darlene stood just behind them, holding a copy of his prepared speech in a folder, though she knew he wouldn't read from it. Not really. Amir never spoke from paper. He spoke from the ache in his throat. The email that had arrived the night before still echoed in his mind. "Before you speak, there's something you need to know about the dean." Attached had been a series of PDFs, internal memos, an ethics complaint, a formal accusation buried quietly in 2006, alleging that Dean Leon Russell had falsified authorship on at least 3 published research papers, while serving as an associate professor. One of them, the same paper that had stolen Malcolm's proof. The whistleblower, now retired, had tried to fight it. But Russell was protected, promoted, and eventually crowned dean. And now, the same man sat center stage, waiting to shake Amir's hand. Amir folded the papers, slid them into his back pocket, and stepped onto the stage. The applause began as polite, then confused, then thunderous. The auditorium rose as Amir approached the podium, not because of protocol but because silence in that moment felt impossible. His story had reached every corner of the campus. His viral video, the documentary, Number S, the protest. He wasn't a novelty anymore. He was proof. He adjusted the mic, cleared his throat. Then, without reading from the folder, he began. "When I was 12, I walked into a lecture hall at this university with a piece of chalk in my hand and an idea in my head." He paused. Let the sentence sit. "I was escorted out before anyone asked me my name." The room was silent now. "I didn't come here today to perform, or to accept anything on behalf of the boy you once tried to dismiss." Amir looked out over the crowd. Professors, donors, students, cameras. "I came here because legacy isn't something you're invited into. Sometimes legacy is something you reclaim, even if someone else tried to bury it." Behind him, Dean Russell shifted uncomfortably. "My father, Malcolm Blake, was a Harrington scholar. His work was erased. His voice, silenced. But his math, our math, lived. In notebooks, in memories, and now, in classrooms full of kids who don't need permission to be brilliant." He pulled the folded documents from his back pocket and held them up. "These," he said, "are emails. From your own archives. Memos that show who authored the work you once tried to claim. Proof that my father's voice was stolen, not just by silence, but by fraud." Gasps echoed through the room. Dean Russell looked down, then looked up, but said nothing. "This university failed us once," Amir continued, his voice steady. "But today I'm not here for their apology. I'm here for every kid who was told they were too much. Too smart, too loud, too black." The audience rose to their feet. He stepped back, chest rising and falling. There was no script, just truth. And this time they couldn't look away. The room exploded into applause. Malcolm's eyes welled with tears. Darlene clapped so hard her palms stung. And then, something unexpected happened. A man from the front row stood. He was older now, gray-haired, short, and slightly stooped. But Amir recognized him instantly. Judge Raymond Keller, one of the officials from the National Math Masters competition. One of the men who had watched him be disqualified for solving the impossible. He stepped onto the stage. The room quieted again. Keller walked up to Amir slowly and reached for the mic. "I wasn't supposed to speak today," he said, voice rough. "But 3 years ago, I sat on a panel that stripped this young man of his victory. We said he hadn't followed procedure. But the truth is, we changed the rules because we didn't believe a boy like him could be that smart." The room was frozen. It wasn't just about procedure. It was about comfort. Our comfort. And we robbed him. He turned to Amir. I can't undo that moment. But I can name it for what it was. Injustice. I'm sorry. It was not scripted. It was not rehearsed. But it was real. Amir nodded once. They shook hands. It wasn't about absolution. It was about acknowledgement. As the audience erupted again, Cheyenne Palmer, filming from the side aisle, whispered to her cameraman, "Got it." Malcolm leaned over to Darlene and said, "That boy just rewrote history," while standing in the place that tried to erase it. She smiled. No, he didn't rewrite it. He restored it. As Amir stepped down from the podium, a woman in a gray blazer met him backstage. She handed him a sealed envelope and said quietly, "The board wants to offer you something, but there are strings attached." Amir sat in the quiet of a newly renovated classroom, sun pouring through windows that once looked out onto cracked concrete. Now they framed a view of a city slowly changing, not because it had chosen to, but because it had been challenged. The classroom didn't belong to Harrington University. It belonged to Numbaras Academy, a school Amir and Malcolm co-founded 5 years after the day he first stepped on Harrington's campus, and was treated like a trespasser. Now the building bore both their names etched in steel above the main entrance. Blake Institute for Mathematical Restoration, once a math program, now a fully accredited K-12 academy, with a national footprint. 6 campuses, dozens of educators, hundreds of black and brown students, solving proofs the world once told them they were never meant to touch. But today wasn't just another day at the Institute. Today marked something different, a quiet victory. A letter sat open on Amir's desk, its header unmistakable, the Department of Education. It confirmed what he had fought for quietly for years, that the math curriculum he'd designed through NumRS, integrating narrative-based problem-solving, ancestral theory linkage, and open-ended deduction-based learning, would now be adapted into public school systems across 3 states, including in the district that once denied him access to advanced placement. But the twist? Harrington University had adopted his pedagogy too, without fanfare, without announcement. But buried in the faculty meeting notes, leaked to Amir by Granger himself, now a quietly supportive ally teaching part-time at NumRS, was confirmation. The undergraduate curriculum would now include a revised approach to foundational logic, based on the Blake-Healy method. They didn't name Amir as the sole author, but the legacy was too loud to erase now. Amir had become undeniable, yet he wasn't interested in being idolized. He turned down most awards, refused honorary degrees, declined high-profile faculty offers. His goal was never to be applauded by the institutions that once tried to crush him, only to replace their gates with bridges. That's why on this morning, he wore no robe, no medallion, just a black sweatshirt that read, "We build what they fear." The classroom door opened. 10 students poured in, full of energy, kids from every background, every borough, kids with brilliance tucked into their speech patterns, their sketchbooks, their laughter. They sat down, and Amir walked to the front. "Today's our final," he said, holding up a laminated sheet. A murmur rippled across the room. Because the equation on the page wasn't new, it was the equation. The same one from the Harrington blackboard, all those years ago. The one Amir solved before anyone asked his name. One girl raised her hand. "Mr. Blake, isn't this the one you—" "Yep," he said smiling, "but don't solve it for me. Solve it for yourselves. Solve it because someone once said you couldn't." They opened their notebooks. The chalk scratched, and Amir stepped back, watching something unfold that was bigger than any proof. A reclamation. A few hours later, as he walked the halls of the school, he passed by a wall of plaques, student achievements, community grants, faculty innovations. But one frame held a different kind of recognition. Not an award, but a resolution. A formal letter of acknowledgement from the National Association of Mathematicians, dated just 2 months ago. "We formally recognize Malcolm D. Blake as the original contributor to the modular reversal theorem, now reinstated in academic records, with full authorship attribution. The board expresses its regret for the delay and justice. It had taken 22 years, but it had happened." That night, Amir visited his father's office. Malcolm was reading, as always this time, a thesis draft from a student in Detroit who'd studied under Numbers' pilot program. "Got something for you," Amir said, handing him a manila envelope. Malcolm opened it, squinting at the document. "What's this?" Amir grinned. "It's your re-enrollment packet." Malcolm looked up. "You've been reinstated. As faculty. Full honors." Guest lecturer next semester. Malcolm shook his head. You serious? Amir nodded. They even backdated your research contributions. Your papers will be taught as originals next term, in the very classroom where they took them. For a moment Malcolm said nothing. Then slowly, he stood and embraced his son. They didn't say much. They didn't have to, because history had been rewritten, not just in ink, but in impact. And still there was one more moment waiting. Later that month, Amir was invited to a quiet ceremony at Harrington. Not publicized, not for the press. The dean had retired unexpectedly. A new chair had taken over the mathematics department. She asked Amir if he would accept an unconditional honorary degree. He declined. But he asked for one thing instead: to teach one guest class. No cameras, no credit. She agreed. And so, one overcast morning, Amir walked into the same lecture hall where it all began, room 3B. He stood in front of a new group of students, none of whom knew the full story. They only knew that the man in front of them had built a school from scratch and redefined the way they understood numbers. He didn't mention the arrest, the theft, the protests. He just said, today we're going to talk about patterns, not the ones in numbers, but the ones in people. And at the end of the session he handed out the same equation. Not as a challenge, but as a conversation starter. A final scene began to write itself. Because as Amir left the classroom that day, a girl in the second row called out, Mr. Blake? He turned. Did you really solve that problem when you were 12? Amir smiled. Yeah. She grinned. Then I will too. She turned back to her notebook. And this time, no one stopped her. In the final frame, the camera pans across a chalkboard in the Numaras Academy, filled with colorful equations and names scribbled in every corner. In the center, a new problem is written in Amir's handwriting, unsolved. Below it, just one line. Leave your proof. We're watching. They said he didn't belong. They labeled brilliance a threat. But he proved that no system, no silence, and no stereotype could erase the truth. If you've ever been underestimated, erased, or told to stay quiet, this story was for you. Type yes if you believe genius has no color. Subscribe if this broke your heart and made you believe in justice.